Hello, everyone. I'm Cecilia, and I come from Sydney, Australia. And it's such a pleasure and privilege to be able to share what I do with this really incredible, engaging, emerging research community. It's just been so far such a wonderful conference. We were saying last night that we would love to learn what you do, so maybe over lunch. I would just love to know about your master's projects. It's really fascinating how you're having different models, and some of you are creating a glass business, others are doing another enterprise. So I really would love to learn about that at lunch. So I'm here to share a project that I haven't shared before. It's called Laces Sound. It's brand new, hot off the press. And it came out of a research powerhouse museum fellowship in Sydney, Australia, where I was able to look at their lace archives and to collaborate with a composer to translate the structure of an archival lace as sound. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Technology Australia, and I lead the textiles on the fashion and textile program. So 40% of our work is teaching, 40% is research, and 20% is admin, but it doesn't always work that way. If you want to see other research projects, that is my website. It took me ages to update before I came here, and it's got 20 years worth of research projects, which makes me feel very old. So I was really fascinated. This conference just came through my email, and I'm on sabbatical at the moment, and I was going to come to Europe, and I thought, this is extraordinary. This is exactly what my research is about, which is this sort of intersection between heritage archival research and how to make things contemporary. So I was really interested in the idea of encounters between heritage and modernity. And I was really interested in all the points that you outlined. So traditional techniques, which in this case is a Branscombe tape lace from the 19th century from the Powerhouse Museum, and the tools with digital technology. In this case, this is the end product of phase 3 of the research, but in this case, I've digitized a section of this lace through a Shimaseki knit technology to materialize these beautiful lace vocals. This will make more sense when I go through, into a contemporary knitted lace. And the new schemes to encourage and transfer know-how is really how to disseminate this in these types of spaces. But also my practices, through my PhD, my practice has moved into how to extend an experience of a textile through animation. So I bring this feeling and structure of a textile through movement in a digital space, and it really expands at what a textile can do and be. So I was fascinated with the first talk, because as researchers, then somebody else can pick up on this and take this further. So it's sort of a link in a chain. It's not the end, so you're welcome to take this up and take it further with regard to your own discipline. Just to give context, I come from industry, so I did a master's. I come from a fine art background, National Art School in Australia. Then I did a master's at Central St Martin's in London, and I have a British passport. And so I was very lucky to be employed by Timony Fowler. They were very well known. This is in the late 90s. I'm very old. But they were one of the key studios at the time. And I learned how to tell stories through textiles. So I learned how to tell stories for the client. I learned how to use textiles and printing to tell somebody else's story. And in this case, we spent hours in an incredible library looking at archives to make them contemporary. So in the talk yesterday with that beautiful Armenian gloves, very much the same. We made this contemporary through a change of scale, through a change of color, So we changed it slightly, but we put compositions and juxtapositions in unusual ways to make it contemporary, as a contemporary expression. But before I go really into the research, I come from Australia, and we always acknowledge that the research is on Gadigal land. So we always acknowledge elders past and present, and also welcome any First Nation people who might be looking or from afar online or here in the space at this research. And my way of acknowledging this extraordinary deep time of 70,000 years that was in Australia is to actually reference the work of Mavis Ganumba. To me, this is a contemporary lace. I was very privileged to exhibit with Mavis. And Mavis comes from Arnhem and it's a fantastic example of what textiles are in terms of community building. So textiles are far more than a decorative piece, as we've all heard since yesterday. They build community. You are an example of a textile community. You are this weaving at the moment. So Mavis uses her knowledge of natural dye to pass down to generations, passing her knowledge of plants, recipes and techniques. And in this way, she sustains story about country, which is incredibly sacred to their culture. This aligns with Tim Ingold. We've heard a lot about Tim Ingold yesterday, now continuing the Tim Ingold trajectory. And he recently has published an article, and he calls it Weaving the World. So he talks about textile techniques as basketry, and it's more than learning about technique. It goes beyond a technique, and Richard Sennett from the craftsmanship talks about this as well. Textiles are beyond a technique. It is about creating meaning, and it is about creating intergenerational knowledge. And so what is happening is that he now laments that knowledge now is in sections and decades with full stops, and that beautiful flow of knowledge between generations is actually being interrupted by the technologies that we're using now. And so this is why this type of practice is so valuable. In my own practice, this is my contemporary lace. I've just completed a PhD. And to frame it, the theoretical framing of creating contemporary lace, people go, why did you get started with the contemporary lace? I had been working in industry in London and New York as a textile print designer, and I had come to the end of that. So when I was working in New York, you generally produce 3 to 4 designs a day. And you have a reference library where you look at all these references and then you translate the story, the theme, the trend. I could walk down 7th Avenue because I knew all the textile designers at the time, had a great social life, and I could look at a print and tell you what page that flower came from, which book it came from. I could tell you through the technique which designer printed it. So I'd kind of reached the end of that. I wanted to expand more. I also happened upon this exhibition called Surface and Structure, which was the rise of a Japanese textile movies trend in the late 90s. So it was the birth of Issey Miyake, Reiko Sudo, and where they were interrupting craft processes and disrupting surfaces, bringing rusty rubber bands, tearing, ripping, shredding. And I was lucky enough to look at this extraordinary exhibition, Nuno Textiles, and something just planted a seed in my head. So when I returned to Australia, through my teaching, I decided to continue with this. I defined my lace through Rosemary Shepherd, who is a lace historian at the Powerhouse. I did a 6-week apprenticeship learning bobbin lace. I wish I could show you how bad the bobbin lace was. I've lost that image. Dreadful. So after 6 weeks, I turned around to Rosemary and I said, Rosemary, I've got an Australian funding. I've got to fill a gallery. It's just not going to work. She had a great sense of humour and she said, I was wondering how long that was going to take you. And she said, would you like to borrow my definition of lace? And I said, yes, please. So her definition, which is very well known and a lot of designers draw from it, is that lace is an open work surface where the pattern of spaces are as important as a solid motif. Cognitively, that just wires my patterning. And from there, I was able to, it totally motivated my work. So I returned to what I knew, which was printing, and I printed hundreds of lace braids and hand cut. This is embarrassing because it shows me I'm obsessive compulsive. Hundreds of organza silks circles, which I machine stitched on a soluble backing. This line work I frame with Tim Ingold, so very famous reference book that everybody is probably familiar with, Lines as a Brief History. So we were talking about yesterday on how to justify your practice-based research and how to validate it. So it's very important to draw from, create a community of practice that is doing the same work. But there was a mention of, you know, why are we referencing these people that wrote 100 years, these theorists 100 years ago to justify our practice? But Tim Ingold, I think for me, really kind of helps me to frame what I'm doing as knowledge. So of course, he calls embroidery, stitching, printing, line making as knowledge making. And he talks about additive substances. In this case, it's the print. And he talks about subtractive substances, which in this case is the dissolving surface. And so the two, when they melt together, merge together to create this new knowledge, this new open work surface. I extend that through cross-disciplinary collaboration. So what you see here is me hand-stitching sensors into the surface of the lace. When the hand over the shadow of the shadow of the hand triggers the sensors, which triggers this sort of augmented digital environment, where I've travelled to Western Australia with Bert, my collaborator, and we project these projections of videos over the lace, but the actual hand changes the colour, the tessellation, and the ambient. The other important phenomena is the materials that I use, and so I'm very interested. Traditionally, lace is a place marker. You could identify it by the materials that it was made from and the patterns. So I was very interested to what is a contemporary place marker. So I'm interested in using unconventional materials, and in this case, it was confidential data shredded at my workplace. So I was walking along the corridor, and there was this bin of overflowing, fabulous shredded documentation, and my textile head just saw that as a textile. So I painstakingly stitched the paper onto a soluble substance and created this sort of lace installation environment. So I put back this shredded confidential data back into my workspace, back into the library. So it's a play on revealing and concealing, and it's got the UTS budget, if you care to look at it. It's got professors' names, students' marks, and people really connected to this piece through their relationship to the actual material itself, but also kind of a sense of pride and connection. So the librarians didn't want me to take this down. They felt very, very connected to the ambience that this piece created. If you haven't come across Elaine Go, she is an incredible theorist to reference your work with. And she talks about textile thinking. So she talks about how textile designers think about the world very differently through notebooks, through mood boards, through collecting things, and how they materialize that. So in my work, I talk about the capacity that a designer has to imagine this waste into lace, and that is actually a fantastic example of textile thinking, that we all have this cognitive ability. So to the lace's sound. So with the Powerhouse, I was able to look at the archives and the stories and the beautiful lace pieces. I became obsessed with the lace braids themselves and these really clunky, ugly, hand-drawn kind of designs that became these ethereal laces. I analysed them, I drew them, I work with India a lot, and so I translated them into wood blocks. And I was fascinated with the history of the invention of the press. So the printing press in the 1600s exponentially allowed lace makers to create lace, which was, I love that relationship because my background is from print. So I did a series of tests which related into, that's very faint, but these sort of ephemeral lace collars that sort of played on the idea of the lace notations and decorations around classic collars and lapels within an object. Then the research really moved into an interesting area when I met Mara and I explained my project. And she is a composer. I babysat her when she was 5 years old. So it really reverses Tim Ingold's theory about intergenerational knowledge because Mara is teaching me so much. And all of you in the room are teaching me a lot. So intergenerational knowledge goes both ways. So to start the project, we did recordings of the bobbin lace. And then we started to have these disciplinary conversations where we found synergies with each other's work. So the patterns in a lace are equivalent to the pattern of silence in music. So they both create form and texture. It was a huge piece of lace. So what we did is that we chose 4 little frills to analyze. So I did a really clunky, ugly info drawing, and Mara created a key in her own graphics of each of the notes. Then each of the little structures within the lace, she has created a voice harmony and a graphic note. So I can show you that during lunch if you want to hear the harmonies. But hauntingly, it brings the women's voices back from history in the space. It's really quite incredible. And we really did want to pay homage to the lace workers in the past that didn't necessarily get acknowledgement. She also did MIDI drawings, which was a sort of electronic version of the lace graphs. So then I translated these electronic back into the hand-drawn, and I tested them through a Shimaseki machine that we have at UTS. And what I love about this, I completely nerd out about this, all the stripes contain the data of each of the knit rows. And so then here you can see how it's digitized in terms of color within the program. The results for me didn't have the nuance that I wanted. And so I kept pushing further. And I sort of was talking to Shirley, the technician. I said, my work really relies on this dissolving process. And she goes, we can do that. I have a dissolving thread that we can knit with. And that's when it got really interesting. So I rescanned, redigitized a section of the lace. You might not be able to see it here, but it took 1,600 needles to actually create this structure. And there's a sort of monofilament that floats as a free layer above the actual lace itself. So this is the final length. To me, it embodies this history, this past, but it's a contemporary new expression through a new technology. And I will do this little experiment to see, what am I pressing? Am I pressing this? Oh, okay. So this is the... It's a bit loud, yeah. So this is the actual score, and the actual, it's 1 minute long. This is the Shimaseki technology, the knit. So it's an animation of the 1,600 needles with Mara's music score. You don't want to watch it again and again and again. Yeah, and so that sort of wraps up the kind of very fun, playful, experimental things. So thank you. That sort of wraps up the research for this stage, and I welcome questions.
Je les aurais toutes faites. Thank you very much. Who has a question?
First of all, thank you for this amazing presentation. I'm very impressed about your background and how you got into lace and how you kept your freedom and your identity as a print designer. Even with exploring lace practice, we talked a bit about this yesterday, but lace in general is a technique that is so stuck with injunctions and conservatism about how it must be done and how it must look. And I'm really admirative of how you're being really creative about it, but still with sticking to an heritage and a legacy. So I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say that it's really impressive to see that you can still have freedom by working with lace, and you do it in a beautiful way. And working with the sound of bobbin lace is something that I find really touching. You say it made you sing also about the voice of all the lace makers that we don't even remember anymore. So yeah, just thank you.
That's a pleasure. I'm not alone. There's a lot of designers and artists working like this. So I think we spoke about that yesterday. But there's, there's a head curator in the UK called Leslie Miller, and she did an extraordinary exhibition called Lost in Lace at the Birmingham. So that's one to look at. Some of the artists there, how they're conceptually using lace as a design source to interpret work is amazing. The other one is Lindy Ward, and she curated the International Love Lace. So there was over 35 countries with over 115 people, artists, using that definition of Rosemary Shepherd, which is a pattern of spaces. So I'm not alone. I come with the crew. And there's some interesting work in the field for sure. I can email you those, yeah.
I don't have a question, actually, same as Josephine. I just wanted to say that it's an amazing work, and it just reminded me that very recently I've heard a documentary about a lace maker, historical documentary, and it was emphasizing on the fact that actually lace makers' workshops were very silent. So that just actually, I think you're giving voices to silent places, so that's really good. Thank you.
That's very poetic. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a question about this visual that we are seeing. It looks to me as stitch. I mean, I'm not familiar with the whole bobbin lace or whatever. But yeah, it does look like a stitch pattern. So you even translated the music into this visual, right?
Yes. So what I did was through the MIDI drawings, the graphics that Mara's music generated, because I was thinking, I was quite lost. I spent 3 months walking around going, I don't know how to do this. Because I had a suite of beautiful voice harmonies, and I was thinking, how do I materialize these? So then I thought, well, I'll start with the graphics, because I'm obsessed with print and pattern. So then I generated those graphics through the computer program of the Shimaseki. So that kind of almost, when it knitted, it poetically sings the lace, theoretically. But, conceptually very strong, but the output was really boring. And so then I pushed, it was only through conversation with Shirley, the technician, and I was going, Shirley, these are boring. And so then I was actually doing a photo shoot of the paper lace, and I showed her, this is my work, this is what I do. I need to create an atmosphere. And she goes, oh, you want to knit an atmosphere? And I said, yes. And then I said, my work really relies on this dissolving process. So then we started to test this dissolving thread through these lace structures that we digitized. And really, that was when the conversation got interesting. And so through that sampling, we developed it. And this was, this is the third point in your research, is how to disseminate this. I think this is a really interesting way of sharing lace making or technology in a new way to people. So it goes beyond, because this is something that the computer generates, but I thought it would be really interesting to pair it with Mara's composition, and it just does something different.
Who else?
Thank you. So just a simple question. When you have this sound, this music, what are you planning to do with it? Do you want to publish it maybe, or exhibit it in the museum? What do you plan to do with the music?
I've got an exhibition coming up in October, so I'm going to have a series of these Shimaseki lace knits. I'm working with another younger designer, and we're creating this stop motion animation of Mara's graphics. So I'm just sort of going to create this environment space. But it doesn't stop there. Other people will look at this and it will trigger their research in some way. And ideally, but I haven't been strong enough to do this, but I think if I sort of did a grant with a hospital and create a very gentle atmosphere in a hospital for people, but I just, hospitals freak me out, so I haven't. So but something like that would be, as an iteration. So either an exhibition or to put it in a public space. Yeah.
That's more technique question. In the machine, is it possible to adapt to the techniques, or is it just the way she's function? And can you take other material, like other fabric inside?
I want to mess with the Shimaseki $250,000 machine. I'll answer backwards. Short answer for the exploration of the yarns. I can explore the yarns within the capacity of the Shimaseki, but I cannot tell you this is like a golden egg for the university. It's so guarded. It was a miracle I actually even was able to use it. There's so many systems I have to go through to ask to get the dean to sign off for me to use it, etc. So I'm not allowed to be experimental with it. But it does have like monofilaments and dissolving threads that you can use. So you can be creative within those constraints. And then, I can't remember your first question.
I think it was if you can use other fabrics inside the machine. No? Adapt the machine of one techniques? I don't know.
It's really tight. So I've never worked in this way before. I have to work through really tight parameters of what this technology does because it's hyper sensitive. It's the only model in Australia.
Okay.
So I'm not allowed to do crazy things on it yet.
Yeah, because now you have nice fabrics technology, like a glass fiber or things like that. And maybe that can be really nice with sound and maybe
that would
work with light.
Yes, so I probably could do that and maybe do that on a hand knit, like a machine, but not on the Shimaseki.
What you show us. I saw a lot of transcriptions from a technique to another, to another, to another. for you, you present it as a way to be creative, but what's have you something to say about this
What's the
transcription?
significance?
Yes.
Why are you
Where
doing
do you
this?
where if you are looking for something you don't know what you're looking for, or is it? I think it's maybe something you should explain in order for us not to see it as une errance. Je sais pas comment on appelle ça.
Just like a little plaything. Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. So, yes, I am looking for something. So that's why I'm pushing those techniques. So in my work, what I'm looking for is to create an atmosphere, an ambience through textiles itself. And so that's why lace lends itself so well, because it's an ethereal property. And so through the light and the shadow and the open work structure, when I create large-scale textiles in a space, it's an atmosphere. So underneath everything, I'm looking for atmosphere. And so as a designer, the printing was an entry point into the research. And I always go back to my printing because it's an entry point. It's not the end result. And it's an entry point because I didn't know what I was doing. But it sort of lets me become familiar with the archive. And then I kind of spent 3 months not knowing what to do. So it's not like I jumped, I'm going to do this. I didn't know what to do because I needed a composer and I hadn't found one. And it was just by sheer luck that I met Mara. And that's when the research really got to grip. So I was able to use the print to explain the project to Mara. And then with Mara, we had the iterations of her practice intersecting. And then again, I had a suite of music I did not know what to do with. And I didn't want to go back to my usual hundreds of hours on a sewing machine. And it was serendipitous that this shimaseki that I was allowed access. So if I'm allowed access to a new technology, I'll jump on that because I haven't worked with it before. And so I'm really testing my practice through a technology that is very, very defined. So yes, it looks like I'm jumping between things. But as a result of that, what has happened is that it's exposed me to all these other research projects that I didn't know about within my own field. So I'm going to create a research symposium to share 4 or 5 different female academics who are doing extraordinary work with shimaseki in a half-day symposium and exhibition. So it sort of has these different branches. But that's what emergent research is. We don't know what's going to come out of it because it's emergent. But I'll tell you in 2 years' time.
Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, sorry, me again. But I recently read an article from the conservator of the Royal Museum from Brussels, because there is a big lace department there. And it's an article about the fact that last century, lace makers sometimes were singing in the workshop while they were lace making. And she explained that some of the songs, the rhythm was based on the rhythm they had while practicing. So it stick to, sometimes when I put a pins, it's this rhythm, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if it's clear. But maybe that's something that could also be added to your work. I don't know. Yes, the singing circles, which would be so beautiful. So beautiful. I love that idea of the pinning, because I mean, it would be very rhythmic. So that their twisting and turning, would correlate to music and patterning. Phase 4.